Yeah, when we've got a character that's sort of atypical, atraditional, yeah, we'll have to do basically custom geometry. For me, my preference ultimately is just to Zremesh, and in something like this too, it's very specific in that there's no kind of split at the neck, right, where we could hide the head and clothing. So in this case, I'd probably have to do the topology for the whole body in one shot. And there's some other things too. I mean, depending on your design and what you plan to do, this nose is separate. If you want it to be flexible and animatable in some cartoony way, you can keep it separate. Otherwise, if it's going to be rather rigid, you can merge this in. So you choose. But typically the eyeballs are separate. I do see separate eyelids, which again is also okay in very, very cartoony characters. So having kind of separate half spheres is totally fine. Um, so you do have to decide, will you merge eyelids into the head and body or not? These ears and the tail are all kind of part of a graphical style, so they seem like they'll stay independent. So in this case, yeah, I'll just kind of pretend, I guess, if the nose is meant to be separate for exaggeration purposes later on, that's fine. Same thing with the eyelids. In most cases, I would actually integrate the eyelids in, but if, again, the cartoony characters can have these very separate kind of floating eyelids that are essentially like half spheres. So that is acceptable in very stylized stuff. Okay, so I will solo. My typical process is basically to solo and then to duplicate the original. So, sorry, I just want to kind of hide all the other stuff that I can. There we go. Oops. Yeah, let's select it, duplicate it. Yeah, and if I'm trying to focus on a one-shot retopology, it doesn't always have to be one shot, and I'll sort of explain why in a minute. But yeah, basically we can still split the head and have that be separate. I don't know. I think the mouth is closed, right? So I'm going to go into masking. I typically will prefer to do a mouth open or jaw open retopology so I can actually get the beginning of a mouth cavity, and then I'll show you how to rotate it back, okay? So again, key areas are things like the eye socket. So again, you want to go up to where the eyelids would approximately be. So you can do this via masking if you want, where we basically just mask in the socket. And I'll often switch to either flat color or skin shade 4. And I'm basically just looking to kind of create an edge loop that'll go kind of right up to the edges of the eyeball or eyelids, regardless of if the eyelids are separate, because we do want good topology to flow around these openings. So I'll hit Control W for that. I'll isolate. So usually what we have in facial topology terms is something that's kind of, I often have seen it referred to as the Robin mask, where we kind of have a big grouping around the eyes, basically the interior where the eyelids meet the eye socket, then the exterior eyelid, then the sort of broader upper brow, brows and upper cheek region into the bridge of the nose, okay, where all the squinting and all that sort of expressiveness happens. Okay, so yeah, basically kind of trying to create big polygroups on these big loops. So you could have one more, it doesn't have to have one more loop, but I think in here it might help a little bit with retopology for this. And we can also turn off the line option as well if it's a bit distracting. So hit Control W, isolate, and then I'll do my Robin mask on this. Animals, stylized creatures, it can be a little bit challenging to kind of guess where that should be, but you want to think about how this face will move, how it will animate, and that's where these polygroupings will help turn that into actual mesh topology. Okay, so yeah, I'll move into actually opening the jaw. So I'm going to go into masking. I'm going to switch to mask lasso in this case. I'm going to just try my best to really carve along the shape of that jawline and sort of estimate where I think it would go. By the way, you may want to do this with perspective off. If you notice, sometimes with perspective on, it'll skew how this masks in a side profile because it's projecting through from left to right, or if you're in symmetry, it'll duplicate that. So with symmetry off, you'll actually get a much more accurate masking there. Okay, so grab that lower jaw. Again, I like to switch to skin shade 4 just to sort of see, am I hitting things? Am I missing some spots? And it looks like I am. So I'll switch to mask pen and just kind of get the top side of that lip area in. So again, it might be a little bit of back and forth, but and this doesn't have to be, laser precise and perfect because we can always shift things around, move them, rearrange them later. Okay, that looks kind of funny, but I'm going to just polygroup it. The other good thing about polygrouping is when you control click on it with the transpose tool or move scale rotate active, you can quickly mask it. And then I'll usually blur the mask a bit. And I will imagine a pivot point for the jaw. I'm going to assume it's sort of somewhere up here. And then I'm going to basically like try to open it. And I might actually just move it down a bit. So there, yeah. Yeah, it's going to look weird, okay? So don't worry about that right now. Yeah, one other thing maybe yeah, I'll leave it like this. Okay. So next up, I'm going to basically try to carve in or select the sort of bottom half of this. So again, I'll kind of just jump into quick masking. Um, let's see. Yeah, I'll flip this around, and then I'm going to mask with lasso again. Mask lasso. This is like, I learned this trick. I forget exactly from what tutorial, but man, is it amazing. It's so good. Oops. Shoot. Yeah, I should have masked this first. There we go. So I'm just tracing kind of the outline of what I think would be the opening. Okay, and then I'm going to mask everything else because I'm going to do this trick. Okay. Okay, so this is going to look weird as heck. So to get the mouth cavity here, right? It's an unusual mouth shape. Okay. I'm going to reset the pivot. I'm going to literally just drag this off to the side. You see? It looks terrible, but check this out. I'm going to go to mesh editing, mirror and weld, mouth cavity. Done. Right? Or at least the beginnings. I don't know. I mean, it's such a simple trick. Yeah, I learned it from some creature designer. I think it was Caesar DeCal Jr., who does really cool stuff. But I love it. I use it all the time now when I'm doing creature stuff. And, if you smooth it out, I just want to show you, it will be a bit messy. The topology might be here. Where is it? Yeah. It's all streaky, right? It's not very even. It's just the beginning of the cavity shape too. So you may want to evolve it some more, right? So what I'll do with this, I'll just show you. Basically, at this point, I would Zremesh or sorry, Dynamesh it to about the same resolution. So I'll hit yeah, Dynamesh. Dynamesh thing is erratic as heck, but it doesn't matter too. By the way, that this is like 100% accurate either. So I can smooth out the issues with the neck when I open the jaw. Now, obviously, this is a very goofy shape. I think it's not necessarily what you might have for the opening. So you can start to sculpt, right? We can do a little bit of touch-up sculpting where we maybe, open the cavity more, right? Because these are more jowls on the sides. So, and by the way, if your mesh or if your brush is grabbing and pulling from multiple parts and sides, you can try to turn on back face mask, which is in my custom interface or under brush. I believe it's under auto masking. Back face mask is right there. Okay, yeah, so let's just take this and really gouge it back. And sometimes I'll just use like a big inflate brush as well, which can help. We'll Dynamesh a bit there. So yeah, I'll go in with inflate and let me just hit, if it's inflating the wrong direction, you just simply hold Alt and you'll start to get these bigger cavities. And then just quick Dynamesh. So again, that can be really, really helpful for sort of speeding up the process of creating that kind of like interior mouth shape. Again, it's quite unique because of the dog shape and the stylization. So I'm assuming, are there fangs that are going to hang out at any point, or is it just like an old dog with just gums for teeth? No teeth? Right. Okay, so yeah, I'll just kind of inflate, start to get some sense of a cavity. Okay, so yeah, at this point too, you can start to kind of mark out as well the inner mouth region, let's say, um, and I would probably also, again, I want to mimic, even though it's an animal, I'd still typically prefer there being polygroups that follow the sort of shape and opening of the mouth or the lip line, and I'll sort of draw it for you very roughly with something called the topology brush. So what that basically means is I would basically try to have a polygroup that flows along in a circular fashion like this around the opening of the upper and lower jaw. Okay, and then I'd want that to keep kind of flowing out into the rest of the character. Okay. You can actually draw topology just to let you know. So if you wanted to kind of create a low res mesh, you can. But again, my preference these days is speed, efficiency, and getting the best result in the smallest amount of time. And I find I get that with Zremesher. So what I'll do is I'm basically going to switch back to a mask pen. And again, I'll turn off the line work here just so it's easier to see. And basically just probably do a big chunky polygroup around the opening edge of that mouth. Okay. And then I'll hit Control W. So I'll isolate that, hide it, and let me see. Yeah, I'll try to mask this interior mouth cavity as well, just on its own, if I can just get it on its own. This can be tricky with these small areas, so I'll show you kind of ways in which I work around this. So I think I've got most of that masked, if I'm not mistaken. But you want to double check. So go to flat color, check around, and I can sort of see, I hit the underside here a bit, so I'm going to hold Control Alt to just demask that. Because what I'm going to do is essentially, yeah, polygroup, and I see some areas that are just missing a little bit. I'm basically going to regroup this into its own. So if I hit Control W, you see that becomes its own grouping now. Okay. Oh, I see it picked up a bit of this area too, so I'm going to just demask that. Okay, Control W, there we go. And so yeah, I'll hide off the other groups that are set that I want to keep, like the eye sockets, the robin mask. I'm going to just hit Control W to sort of redo the jaw here. That grouping was very temporary for opening the jaw, right? So yeah, we could have maybe one more grouping in here just to kind of get good radial loops around the mouth opening. Yeah, and I see sometimes too this happens, you get like a little stray grouping that's missing or it's kind of in between. I'll use the move scale rotate tool to control click on that, and then control click off the model to flip the mask around, and then control paint, Control W, and that adds that little bit that was kind of missing there. Okay. Okay, so for the rest of the body, I would probably suggest just doing very big, broad groups. Again, this is a unique situation where I'm doing it all at once. So I'm going to go to Mask Lasso. So I'll hold Control, click on the mask brush, and go to Mask Lasso. So I'll kind of separate here at around the neck. Hit Control W. I'll probably just do one down the middle. This is a bit easier. It's more straightforward. So I'll sort of, yeah, have a bit of an angle here. Control W. Then I really want to get into kind of the joints in this case. So I'm going to just make sure I really get kind of that outer upper leg into the shoulder region. I think that's pretty good. Okay, and then at any joint, right? So I'm going to Control Shift click on this, and then there's kind of the knee joint. Then there's basically like the ankle. And then I think we'll probably still have like a ball of the foot, right? So I'll go to this. Usually it's on a bit of an angle, ball of the foot, Control W, okay? So now I'll isolate the back end and do roughly the same thing, hindquarters as they call them. Okay, and this looks pretty good. If you have to ever touch it up, it's fine. You can paint it, you can lasso it. I usually prefer painting when it's on the model. So I might just, with Control, click and drag on the model, just improve the coverage of that. Yeah, I'm also doing this with a, a mouse, which isn't the best, but it'll do for now. Okay, so by the way, there's some other controls with masking. Control Alt click and drag. Sorry, Control Alt click repeatedly will sharpen a mask. Control click will blur, so you can actually sharpen then blur, sharpen then blur. So sometimes I use that to maybe refine how close things are to certain areas, or to see where that masking will be affected. So Control W. Again, I'll Control Shift click on it to isolate, and this is kind of the knee zone, right? Switch back to lasso. Control W. Control W, and then one more here. Control W. Okay, so let's turn on our wireframe. Usually the way I like to work with remeshing is actually going in half, and I find it helps kind of maintain the overall shape. It's a bit longer, but yeah, if I say Z-remesh half the poly count, it'll go from 300,000, which it is now, to 150, then from 150 to 75. And I'll say keep groups, and I'll turn on smoothing up to the max, and I usually turn off adapt. So adapt is an option that will try to maintain certain features at the cost of the poly count. And my focus is getting to the poly count I want to get to. So for what I recommend in your films, like 80,000, maybe 100,000 these days is a maximum for the total character mesh poly count. And I usually split that. 50% goes to the head, right? Because that's the thing that often is seen in close-up, and 50% to the body, right? So 50% is all about the facial, animation, performance aspect. So out of 100,000, 40,000 to the head, 40,000 to the body, and everything else, okay? So I'm going to Z-remesh this in half and just see what happens. Okay, so this is looking good, right? And one of the things too is like sometimes these lines are wobbly, which is one of the reasons why I turn on smooth groups. But one of the problems with smoothing groups as you remesh is that it can destroy the overall volume and shape, but I get that back through projection typically. This effect, by the way, of the smoothing kind of altering the shape, so I'm going to remesh again as I talk, but it gets more drastic the lower poly things get. So usually once I hit kind of sub 100,000 or 50,000, that's where I'll sort of pump the brakes on that and maybe change a little bit. So I'll either turn down smoothing groups or just turn it off and maybe try to go in half one more time. I often will work at lower than my target poly count resolution, and it's kind of dumb and it kind of works. I'll explain how that works. So when we look at poly count, let me just open up Notepad. Okay. So a model that is 80,000 polys, for example, right? If you divide that mesh by 4, which is how many, when you subdivide a mesh, basically you're smoothing it or dividing it and smoothing it, it usually multiplies the poly count by 4. So I go the opposite way and I think, okay, what is this going to equate to if I divide it by 4? So that will equate to roughly, exactly 20,000 polys, right? And then if you divide that by 4, okay, that is what, 5,000 polys, right? If I take that and divide that by 4, what is that? 1250-ish, let's say, 1250 polys, okay? So sometimes I'll actually work ultra low resolution so I can quickly make like clean loops around the mouth opening, the eyes, clean up loops around the joints that need to be focused on. And I work at this resolution, but then what I'll do towards the end is actually divide the mesh up to 5,000 or 20 or 80, and that will become my true base mesh, but it'll be so much faster to work on a mesh that literally has 1/16 the number of edges and vertices, right? So it's a way to work faster, smarter, more efficiently, and still get the overall effect that you want. So I may try to get lower, and I can sort of see, the edge loops here, if you take a look, the one thing you want to find when you have these loops is if you Control-Shift-click on a loop and it does that, that's perfect, right? And it's a little bit broken here just because of an extra edge, but that's fine. And sometimes I do wind up having to delete a polygroup sort of like this, and I'll show you why in a minute. But if you ever need help or if you want to assist the remesher, that's when I go back to the Z-Remesh Guides brush, just to try to give it some help to say, okay, I want to keep these loops flowing in a circular fashion in this area. So it will try. I don't know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so I'll draw that around, and I'll Z-Remesh in half again, okay? Yeah, I mean, I think it's mostly there at this stage. Definitely, this area is definitely not working great, but and it's really just this polygroup, I think, in general that's a bit off. The other thing I want to do is, yeah, double check the poly count of kind of head versus body here. So if I hide this, sorry, yeah, just Control Shift clicking on this. I'll switch to, there we go. Yeah, I mean that's like a third. The head is a third, so it's not half half exactly, and that's fine. We'll typically I usually wind up adding extra loops anyways. So if I lose loops around the eyes, I will typically go to Z Modeler and sort of say, okay, I'm going to insert some extra loops here just to make sure there's density for, um, right, for things like creasing, folding, wrinkling, that kind of thing. And if the edge loops are ever uneven, I typically hold Shift and let go, but I'll wait to come back to that in a little bit. So, I mean, I think I'm pretty okay overall with, I think the topology of the pause, yeah, I mean, this seems okay to me. Yeah, it's really just this polygroup. So, yeah, I'll see what I can do within this grouping if I can. I'll show you a couple of tricks. I'm not 100% sure that this will work in this circumstance, but there's some really interesting features. So if I Control Shift click on this group, let me just turn on double-sided display. You can do something really interesting. So I can actually split this to its own parts. Okay, so it's split. There's something buried in Zremesher that I don't have in my custom interface. So if we go into Geometry Zremesher, you can actually say freeze border, keep the same poly count, and try to remesh this part on its own. It doesn't always work great. So like I said, it's, you know, if I try it, it's kind of like breaking a bit. It's not working well. Then, you know, typically I'll wind up kind of abandoning it at some point. Yeah, like it's just breaking. It's not very good. So I've deleted that section, which, or removed it, I should say. Yeah, let me, sorry, go back to isolating, hiding it, deleting it. So I'll go to delete hidden. And so what I'll try next is maybe just bridging between these two areas, and I'll go to Z Modeler. Sorry, let me just reset here. Still custom, there we go. Z Modeler, hover over an edge, and I'll hold spacebar, go to bridge, and say bridge two holes. Typically, I want this to be a flat polygroup, so I'll just select flat. That basically means when it bridges, it'll create one solid polygroup. Oops, let's try that one more time. It can be very tricky, especially in the mouth cavity. Yeah, and you can see that's sort of broken too, right? So sometimes what I'll do is when these things aren't working the way I'd expect them to, I will go into extrude, usually go to edge loop. And so I'll left click and drag on this if I can. Yeah, extrude, edge loop. Let's try. Oh, yeah, I think I still have the mesh there. So I'm going to delete the hidden again. There we go. Extrude. Yeah, if extruding is just moving one loop, I find the option to the right of it, edge loop, will give me the loop I want. So that's about the shape that we had, right? So that's pretty close. And then I'll try to kind of extrude upwards and inwards. Right, so I'm kind of maintaining these circular loops basically. There, and I'll try to get this loop in as well. Okay, so I might wind up abandoning that area too. So I'm going to delete that, delete hidden. There's a little bit of work in here to do as well. There's, you know, this is pretty extreme too. There's little, you know, I didn't get the full loop extruded for whatever reason, so I'm going to just see if I can pull these points back down. There we go. This is like an open edge from the extrusion. And I'll just do this. I'm actually just going to go back to Z Modeler, hover over vertex mode, hover over vertice, I should say. And I will say, let's stitch together 2 points. So click that one, and then I want to just get to the other one there. Oops. Let's see. I think is hiding it right here. Come on, you. There. Okay, so I think they've stitched together, finally. And it's a bit rough in there for sure. So I'll show you another trick to this. So if I go into close, I can try this. I'll go to close, convex hole. There. Yeah, I mean, that may not be great. So, like I said, this is a very specific issue with this character, which is fine. But yeah, I think I'll try to bridge across. So a lot of times my other trick is to bridge just 2 edges, and I'll show you how this works in a second. So I'll click this edge here, go across to the same edge on the other side. Okay, we'll bridge. So this is a bit more manual work, of course. Sometimes it does happen where this sort of has to happen. Yeah, let's do that. I'm going to bridge, and then I'll try to see if I can do close again, close convex hole, and see what that looks like. Yeah, it's not bad. So yeah, I'll try this again. I'll go to bridge. Oops, bridge. I'm just going to do 2 edges. So I kind of want to get to from the back of the mouth to the front. Okay. Then I'll see if this will bridge 2 holes potentially. Look from one side to the other. Yeah, if not, then we'll have to go the manual way, which is, it's a bit time consuming, but we're going kind of edge to edge. Okay. So again, I often don't have to get to this point, but like I said, in this case, because of the unique mouth shape, I think the unique topology, and again, one of the reasons I'm working at 10,000 polys, imagine if you had to do this with 40,000 polys going all the way up, it would take forever. So that's why I highly, highly recommend, go sub and try to do it in a smart way. If you feel like you want just 50,000 polys, well, then divide that by 4. You're at, what is it, like 1250, right? 12,500. Then you go divide that by 4. Okay. So I'll just, yeah, try to clean that up. Okay, so I basically got most of this done. If you want to, then you can go into inserts, multiple loops. So I do want to basically match up, let's say, a couple of edge loops in the middle here, right? So we can essentially target weld this in. By the way, if you do insert loops and it does this striping thing, if you don't like that, which I typically don't for things like this, I'll say keep the same polygroup or keep group. Keep group will create a new grouping, and then I can do my stitch here to stitch to these border edges, right? And so that's basically it. You got a clean mouth cavity. You can still, add some loops and things in here. Okay. Again, I would most definitely add some more topology as well. So yeah, let me just insert here. Same number, because I think I have the same approximate opening. Maybe it's a little different. Yeah, a little different. That's okay. So I usually just try to match up the verts. Okay, there we go. Okay. So as mentioned, oops, did I add some extra loops here? I may have. Sloppy clicking sometimes. Okay, just clean that up. So I'm going to go and add, again, more loops in some other areas, like particularly around the mouth. So again, good, clean, circular loops. And you can do with them as individual loops or multiple, but I don't want to get too crazy, too dense. I do typically like to keep density relatively even throughout my mesh, meaning that it's not super high poly in one spot. So I'll switch to single loop insert just because I think it's going to give me a little bit better spacing. Again, this will be taken care of in a moment when I do the project all. So yeah, let's do that. this one. I've got this one. I'll get it a solo. Yeah, that's that one. I'm going to delete that one. So I'll take this model. Yeah, by the way, we have the jaw open, right? So that's going to be a little bit of an issue. But what I'll do for now, I'm going to just expose both the old school and the new one here. I will essentially mask the lower jaw just to sort of protect it for this segment of projecting. Excuse me. And then I'll also hide any kind of mouth cavity because it's not in the other mesh. But if we just take a look at this, go to solo for a second, and we hit project all, you'll see, by the way, you should make sure nothing else is visible but the original and then this new version, right? And another thing I like to do is actually get out of solo, go into transparency mode, and I can sort of see, right? Look at the shape of the mouth here. This is partly what that smoothing groups thing does, right? So I want to really recreate that mouth closure. So I'm going to try to pull those shapes back and in, okay? So this is what I was talking about earlier about, maybe distributing the polys a bit better and changing the shape. We want to actually fit and flow and follow the actual mouth opening, right? When you hit project all, it'll snap to the shape. If you need to redistribute, I usually hold shift and let go. And what that does is it actually kind of keeps the volume the same, but actually redistributes the polys a little bit better. So that can be a bit helpful in these instances. Okay, so project all again, just to make sure I've got the mouse shape. And if I solo, right, you can sort of see it is hopefully capturing that shape fairly well. So again, similar to what I discussed earlier, I will usually split the upper and lower mouth just so it becomes easier to rotate the jaw, the mouth, the lips, project individual lips and not the cavity. So I'll go to Z modeler, select lasso. And then I'm going to just, again, regroup this for this purpose. So there we go. Just hide that, Control W. Same thing, I'll isolate the mouth grouping. Sometimes too, yeah, this looks fine. Sometimes I can just go to group by normals and this will split into 2 or 3 patches. I just want upper and lower, so I'll just regroup this as one polygroup. So yeah, now I can basically just isolate the upper lower here. I'm just going to hide some of this stuff so I can do a mask. So I'll control click off the model, flip it around, flip back, and then I'm going to go back to my approximate jaw rotation, and I'll get a solo and maybe transparency mode so I can sort of see, okay, this is sort of where it should rest, right? Or move back into a position. Again, I'll go to solo. Clearly the neck is kind of pulling off a bit, so I'm going to, again, just smooth out a bit. Maybe blur the mask a touch and then reposition some of this stuff so it's sort of sitting where it should be. So again, just using the move brush is typically fine for this. And then I'll try to just hit project all. So whenever you have an area that's masked, it will not be affected by project all, okay? Just so you're aware, right? So then that's kind of shrinking up to the original, right? I'm not sure how precise it is, of course, so let me just fix this a bit. Okay, so we're getting, I think, a pretty decent shape overall. I am getting a little bit of stretching too, so I might decide to kind of do a little bit of smoothing, a little bit of reshaping. So sometimes, as you go through this process, there's a little bit more kind of work or resculpting or just proportional changes and adjustments that need to be made. But, yeah, let me just check this out. One of the things I'm looking at too, I think there's a little bit of stretching in this area. So I might go in and try to add the Z modeler, add another loop or two. But just keep in mind, it might shoot off into the rest of the body. So just depending on what you're doing, you may decide to change that. This is where I'm actually I haven't maybe figured out how to work exactly with this yet, but in Maya, this would be easier because I could manually cut in these extra loops and then have them kind of circle back into the mouth and not go all the way through the body. So this is where I might do a bit of manual editing in Maya, but I think for now I'm okay with this. I'm going to just see if I can redistribute the polys a bit better with the shift, click and drag and let go technique, which spreads those polys out throughout the rest of the body there. So that can help a bit. Okay. So again, good polygon distribution, good density for where we need it for animation. I might add, yeah, maybe 1 or 2 more loops in the eyes here. And there we go. Okay. So now I'm going to try project all. This time what I will do is, I'll see if I can just hide the mouth cavity. As tricky as that thing is. Oops. And remember too, you know, if you have issues with spikes and stuff, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go to morph target. So I'll say store morph, project all. You may get some wildness in the face and the mouth, right? So if we isolate, there could be spikes and things. For now, it looks fine. Okay, so I'm going to divide this up. So a lot of times too, when I'm ready to kind of move up, yeah, if I divide this once, it's 46,000. So that actually could be okay for your base resolution. Because the other thing is often when you have a base resolution mesh, you will typically also be smoothing it in Maya at render time. So that means the poly count goes up 4 times. So really anywhere between like 40, 80, even up to about 100,000. For me, I still kind of recommend a cap of about 80,000 for your low-res character, just because you could have lots of things on screen. It could be very, you know, slow to animate. So it's useful to kind of keep the poly count a bit lower if possible. So now if I just hit project all, you know, I might get some good results. As you can see, it's a little bit splotchy here and there. So again, I'll go to delete and then store morph target. And I'll do project all. Yeah, project all. Where are you? There we go. Project all, right? If you're seeing these gaps, what that basically is sort of saying, hey, you know, the other mesh that is visible or should be visible, right? This part's kind of too far away. So I find if you sort of smooth back a little bit and then hit project all, that helps, right? It'll get closer. Or you can just take a move brush and say, okay, let's shove this back so it's actually within the range, the distance slider, and it'll snap right to it, okay? So again, we're getting little spikes with the lips. I'm going to smooth them back and then just solo, but right, I think the essence of the character is still there, right? The topology is good. It's clean. It's usable for animation. Now, I don't necessarily stop at this poly count. So I want to explain this. So division level 1, it's 1100 polys. So if I ever want to go back, I usually like to keep this level just for editing and re-topologizing. Like I said, if I want to add some loops, maybe take it to Maya, clean some things up, or change the mouth. I find Maya has some better tools still for some of these like finer mesh editing issues. But that's not the one I'll export. I would export division level 2, which is my 46,000, okay? I still will go up in division, so I'll divide once, twice, you know, again, similar to the poly count of the previous one, which is what, 700,000, 600,000? So this is at 700,000. Again, I'll go back. It's always important to do this. Delete and store morph targets. So if you get weird spikes, right, we can fix them just by morphing back. Hit project all, right? You'll get a pretty full transfer of all the texture, any sculpting detail. And again, I'll either smooth or morph, right? To get some of the lumpiness out, right? But everything's there. Everything's been transferred now, right? So we don't need the rough Dynamesh anymore. The kind of conceptual sculpt, that part's done, right? So I'll toss it out. I've got the new one here. Let me just turn it on. If I want to, you know, fix some of the lumpiness in the face or where the lips meet or whatever, right? I've got my tricks where I use move topological to get the lips to meet. Maybe I want to inflate the lower lip. By the way, I want to show you this too. So when I inflate, you see because the circle is covering the upper and lower lip, it does both, right? So move topological, all it is the move brush with under brush menu. There's a setting in here, again, under auto masking called topological. And what that basically means is it says, hey, there's actually a big, huge gap, and that mesh across the way, the upper lip and lower lip are actually really far away from each other. So just inflate the lower lip. You see? So that I find really, really useful too when you're kind of working in lip and mouth areas. And again, I'm not sure if I've totally distorted the shape of the character, but it looks close, right? So for me, this is almost like identical. I've now got the benefit of a clean mesh. It's riggable now. It's skinnable. I can animate with it, okay? And yeah, if I go back down to the low res, like I said, because I added some additional density in and around the eyes and the mouth, I should roughly have, yeah, this is 2,000 polys. The rest is actually 8,000. So sometimes too, as a cheat, what I will do, if you want to increase density or relative density, meaning that the face has roughly half the poly count, just simply do this. Go to Z Modeler, okay? Go into the head or in the body, let's say, and under Insert Loop, if you hold Alt, oops, let me, I do have to delete my high poly actually for this, but this is one example actually where you can use freeze, and I'll show you how this works. So freezing will actually store all your projection, all your sculpting, all your subdivisions, and hide it away so you can edit. So let's say I take out every second edge loop, okay, which I often do to kind of de-densify other areas of mesh. And I do want to be a bit strategic about it, where I do it, how I do it, because I don't want to, have weird loops and polys happening. So I'll try to kind of skip every second loop where possible. All right. So again, much easier to do on a lower poly mesh, okay? Yeah, and I don't want to do it where it flows into the head as well, but yeah, let's just try around here. Oops. So yeah, this can be one other step you may want to use, but honestly, most of the time I just want to adding more mesh into the face, okay? And then again, to separate these edges so they don't look clustered together in certain spots, hold Shift, left click, or put your tablet pen down, and then let go of Shift and then drag, and you see it redistributes the edges very, very cleanly, right? So it tries to maintain the overall form while also better distributing the polys. And if the shape shifts a bit, project. Go back to your old version if you have it, project it. So yeah, just one final point about this. When you unfreeze, it actually brings back all your projections, all your detail, and all your subdivisions. And sometimes, the mesh might have a little mismatch or difference, but it's almost like doing a self-projection. So if you need to, you can kind of just go back to low res and then step up and unsmooth. But this is a way that ZBrush allows you to edit your mesh without losing all your projections and all your different layers and whatnot inside the sculpt, okay? So very, very useful for editing a base mesh and cleaning up certain things and still keeping your projections